Before we get into today's episode, let me ask you something. Do you know what your current level of English really is? Understanding your level is crucial to tracking your progress and ensuring your hard work is paying off. That's why I've created a quick and easy English level test that you can take right now for free. Find out your level instantly. Just head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or check the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to another episode of the British English Podcast with me, your host, Charlie Baxter, where we very often delve into cultural differences and or similarities to try and help you better understand the workings of a British person, our culture and the language we use. And very often it's useful to compare with our cousins across the pond in order to expose the norms. And so I have managed to encourage a close friend back on the show who is indeed from the US. And this person appeared on the podcast earlier in the year to talk about her move to London, where she is still currently residing, which I think was a great episode to check out if you are thinking about moving to London or have recently moved there, because she has a bunch of useful tips and observations that will help you feel a bit more at ease about the whole thing. So that one was season 3, episode 5. But of course, this one is not about that move. We've been there and done that. No, today I was desperate to get this person back on because she recently experienced something rather unique. I'm not going to tell you any more about that yet, as we will get to it, but just know that the theme of this episode was inspired by this pretty unique experience that she has recently had. And I really look forward to hearing about it, as I have told her to save it for when we are recording. So as you might have seen from the title of this episode, we are going to be exploring the world of drugs, both recreational and pharmaceutical. But it's a bit more fun to talk about the recreational ones, so it might not be a 50-50 split. We will see. Oh, and to cover my backside, I should say, this episode does not encourage one to use or abuse drugs in any way, shape or form. We are merely discussing the norms of one's society and how drugs may or may not have played a part in it. All right, with that introduction out of the way, let's finally say hello to Caity, the matey that I made in Columbus, Ohio. How is the morning treating you today, madame?
Hello, it's treating me very well, thank you.
Yes, I remember the last time you told me how your dog Louis had been taken to daycare. Is that the same today, or is he with us today?
It's the same situation today. He's at daycare. Otherwise, he'd try to steal the spotlight. Yeah,
don't want that, especially considering the story that you've got in store for me about your experience. But we won't say it yet. We won't say what it is. I thought we would delve into some questions around pharmaceutical drugs first, but generally around the idea of drugs. Do you feel like you've got much to say on the idea? Has it been part of your experience as an American growing up, like drugs around you? Is it a thing, or you're just like, well, it's life. It's what it is?
I mean, maybe a bit of both, but yeah, definitely. I think Americans in general have a very high exposure to medicines and prescriptions and things like that, which we can chat a bit more about. But yeah, so I think I've been very exposed to it.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's start off with something rather easy. What do you call a painkiller? Because every country I've been to, they're called something else. So what do you call them?
That's a good question. I think we would call it a painkiller, but we also speak, like, we call them by their name. Like, if we were taking ibuprofen, we would take ibuprofen. If we were taking acetaminophen, we would take acetaminophen.
Well, you said that very quickly. Can you slow that down for me, please?
Sorry. Acetaminophen.
Acetaminophen. Okay, I'd probably change that, like my accent. Acetaminophen? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's different for us. So we would say paracetamol, or we would say ibuprofen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think ibuprofen is one that overlaps, but paracetamol is essentially acetaminophen.
Have you noticed when you go into a drugstore, if you say your word for it, they don't understand you?
Yeah, I think so. I think I probably kind of know what I'm looking for, so I don't know if I've asked a lot, to be honest. But I do think if I said acetaminophen, I think they might be a little bit confused. And it certainly has happened that I've gone to the pharmacy looking for something and not known what to ask for, knowing what the American word is, not just painkillers, but other things as well.
Have you ever wondered if you're making real progress in your English learning journey? Knowing your level is the key to recognizing your improvements. I have a fantastic tool for you, a free English level test that gives you an instant result. Take a few minutes now to discover your level and continue your learning journey with confidence. Visit thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or click the link in the show notes to find out your level of English today.
Hello, sir. Welcome to the British English Podcast Bed and Breakfast. How can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to check in early, please. I have a reservation under the name of Mr. Smith, and I'd like to listen to the podcast for free.
Certainly. And would you like a turn-down service and a complimentary worksheet with your stay?
Pardon me?
A turn-down service and a free worksheet.
What on earth are they?
Let's see now, shall we? A turn-down service includes getting your bedroom ready for a night of sleep. In other words, I get in your bed, roll around in it, and then get back out. Oh, and the free worksheet is available for anyone listening to the British English Podcast. You can access it by going to the britishenglishpodcast.com/freebies. That's FREEBIES. By clicking the link in the show notes of this episode, or you can download the app called the British English Podcast app. It's rather impressive, as you can listen to every single episode and see the free worksheet on the same page. Very, very useful, and as I said, complimentary usage for any of our guests. So, how's about that turn-down service, eh? Fancy it?
I think I'll pass on that, thanks, but I'll definitely be downloading the app you mentioned, yeah. Where can I get my hands on that then?
In your device's app store, sir. Search BEP for BEP or the British English Podcast. You can't miss it.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. What room number am I?
Room number 325, sir. Take the lift up to the 3rd floor, take a left, and voila! Your home away from home awaits you.
Right. Thank you. See you tomorrow at breakfast.
Sleep well.
Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Because we really do have an abundance of them on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. And we do have a brand that people know of as Nurofen. Do you use that?
I do, yeah. You have that. Nurofen is ibuprofen, I think.
Nurofen is ibuprofen, yes.
Yeah.
Do you have Advil, don't you? Do you have Advil?
Yeah, Advil it's a brand name, but I don't think Advil is acetaminophen. I think it's something else. So, but it's similar, yeah. So there's like the brand name, and then there's the actual, so like Tylenol, for example, is one that we have. That is acetaminophen, but it's the brand name.
Yeah, so that feels very American. I think that's mentioned in films, like Tylenol. How do you say it?
Yeah, Tylenol.
Tylenol, yeah. That's paracetamol, I think, Tylenol. And then Advil, I think, is ibuprofen.
Yeah.
I noticed a funny moment. So ibuprofen, that's quite a few syllables. I was on a ski trip with Stacey's dad and brother, and we were in the cabin, and her brother said to me, "Oh, Charlie, have you got some ibuprofen?" Ibuprofen. And I said, "What are you saying? Are you saying ibuprofen?" And I was about to dig into him and have a joke. And then his dad turns to me, said, "Oh, have you got the ibuprofen? I'd like that as well." So, okay, there's a trend in the family. So,
and you also, if you were to go into it's different here. So if you were to go into the shop, into the grocery store and try to buy ibuprofen or acetaminophen or paracetamol, you can only buy 2 packs. There's 16 tablets in each pack, and you can only buy 2 packs. I mean, you walk into a shop in the US and you can buy a giant bottle of 350 ibuprofen capsules. So it's very different in terms of the way it's sold as well.
Yes, that's very good to point out. I think that was one of the first things I noticed when I went to a CVS. Is that a pharmacy in America?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Buckets. Like, you can almost get a bucket full of drugs. Yeah, they're very protective.
There's no limits on those.
Very protective in the UK. I think it's because they think you can overdose. I mean, you can overdose, can't you? Yeah,
you can, yeah.
Any idea why America doesn't give a shit?
I think just in general, we have a very different relationship when it comes to medication. And, you know, the US has a medicine for profit. So it's a very different story.
Yes, and that will probably shape this conversation. Also, do you think it's at all to do with, like, I can be whoever I want to be? I can get a bucket load of pills if I want a bucket load of pills. Like, you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, probably. There's probably a lot of that in there as well. I think they kind of go hand in hand, where we've ended up in our system of medicine for profit as well, like that mentality, as well as coupled with, you know, trick or treating for medication.
Yeah. What kind of drugs and vitamins are common in a household in America, particularly perhaps yours when you were growing up?
Painkillers for sure. Ibuprofen was never in short supply. And there's a lot of different forms, as there are here, but, you know, there's ibuprofen or acetaminophen for nighttime use, so it helps you sleep, cold and flu, you know, all the different variations that you can take these things for. And melatonin is another one that's a big one, so which is a naturally produced thing. I think people think of it as pretty like mundane, but that's illegal in the UK. You can't get it. Well, it's not illegal, but you can't get it over the counter. Whereas in the US, not only can you get it over the counter, but you can get it in some really high dosages as well.
And just to put a bit of English phrases to bed, or like to explain a few, because it will come up a lot. Over the counter and prescription. Mm-hmm. Over the counter means you can buy it without a doctor's note. And prescription means you need to go to the doctor and then they confirm whether you need it or not. So yeah, over the counter. Okay. I've never really heard of getting, what is it? Melanin, as in?
Melatonin.
Melatonin, sorry. What does melatonin do?
So it helps you sleep. It's a hormone that your brain produces and your body produces as you're falling asleep. And so lots of things can throw your melatonin out of whack. So if you take melatonin, it helps you fall asleep. So it is a natural thing, but it's a hormone. So it should be taken, you know, cautiously. Whereas you can buy it in quite high milligrams in the US just without a prescription.
Right. Yeah, that does actually ring a bell now. And have you ever taken melatonin?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that was, you know, it's pretty common in my household, and my parents definitely use it. I've used it. I think it's looked at as like I would say almost everyone I know has used it.
What were you going to say?
Oh, it's a pretty, you know, benign kind of thing. I think you would think of it almost as taking, in the same realm as taking ibuprofen. Oh, I've got a headache, I'm just going to take some ibuprofen. Oh, I can't sleep, I'm just going to take some melatonin. It's pretty viewed as pretty non-addictive, not habit-forming, that kind of thing.
And is it addictive in any way?
I don't know if it's addictive. I definitely know it is a hormone. And I think there are more studies coming out about it now saying you shouldn't take it in high milligrams and you should be really mindful of when you take it. Like you certainly shouldn't be taking it every night because it can affect, you know, the things that are going on in your body.
Right. And does it help you sleep a lot? Like significant different?
Yeah, I do find it does help. If I'm really struggling to sleep or if I'm jet lagged, that's a good time to use it when you're trying to regulate and get your body back on track in terms of sleeping. It does really help you fall asleep. And then they also have ones that are like time release. You have, when you take it, gives you a little bit and helps you fall asleep. And then it releases more a couple hours later to help you stay asleep.
Whoa.
As well.
Clever.
Fancy one.
Yeah, clever pills. You just reminded me of a really common drug that Americans have. What's it called? What are some of the really common ones that like people joke about, like knocking you out, basically?
Xanax?
Yes, a Xanax.
Yeah.
So what does that do exactly? Do you know?
So I believe, I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I believe that Xanax, well, it's like an anxiety and potentially even depression medication. I think it came to rise pretty prevalently in like the 50s. It was like a big thing to take a Xanax. I mean, it still is to this day, but I think it helps relieve stress and anxiety, but basically it knocks you out, more or less. It makes you tired or puts you to sleep.
Okay.
Which alleviates the anxiety. I don't know exactly what type of what type of anxiety or depression medication it is. There's a few different types, but yeah, it's a very common one.
I've got it here. Xanax, spelt differently than what I thought. Xanax is a benzodiazepine. I hear that in films, like if they've had a big night drinking or something, they're like, I'm just going to pop a Xanax and get through it, kind of.
It would help you sleep. If you were trying to stay awake, something you would see a lot in films, it would be Adderall.
Adderall. Okay. Adderall. How would I say it? Adderall. No. Wouldn't say Adderall. I don't know how to say it. Adderall. Oh, goodness me. Okay. Oh, it's an Rall. Adderall. Adderall. We're going to have to go American, I think. How would you use Adderall? Like to stay awake, you say?
Yeah. So Adderall, when it's prescribed, is meant for ADHD or ADD, usually typically in like teenagers. I think it's meant to help them focus. That's like the intention of it. A very common thing, especially when I was in college, like Adderall use in college was a very common thing. If someone had a paper to write or needed to stay up all night to finish a project, they would take an Adderall because it would help keep them up, but also keep them really focused. But is another thing that if someone is, wanting to stay up all night, drinking and partying, they would take an Adderall. Obviously not what it's prescribed for.
Yes, abusing.
Mm-hmm.
Would you use the verb pop? Pop an Adderall?
Yeah.
Juice, yeah? Any
Pop
other?
an Adderall. Take, pop, have, depending on how you consumed it.
Okay, so you mentioned how Americans have have a relationship with drugs that is somewhat around capitalism, or the idea that it's for profit. Can you tell me a little bit more about your thoughts around this thing?
Sure. I mean, I can kind of explain why Americans tend to have a really just like innate knowing of medication, understanding of medication, what these names are, what they do, more so than anywhere else, I would say, because from the time we are little, we are inundated with ads for medications. It's very common when you're watching television, you'll see 2-3 ads maybe in a commercial break for a different type of medication. And so it's typically like a sunny day and someone's running through a field or like high-fiving someone on the street and they're saying, take this, this medication does this, this, and this, and it'll make everything better. And then the second half of the ad typically lists, I've also noticed as I get older, the lists of the side effects. They kind of run through them really fast and say, you could have blah, 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 really negative, bad side effects. They kind of run through them. And at the end of every ad, it says, ask your doctor about Xanax or whatever the prescription or medication is. And the intention of this is so that you go into your doctor and you say, oh, I have these symptoms and I heard about this on TV. What about this? And that obviously puts the demand there from the consumer, right? Because it's for profit. It's like the patient bringing it to the doctor saying, what about this medication? And it's been like that long before I was born. And it's been like that my whole life.
Wow. Yeah, that's rare to go to a doctor, in my opinion. I mean, I haven't been to the doctor loads, but as an adult, but yeah, I would never really think about finding a drug before I go to a doctor. I would always go to the doctor to be told what I need because of what they think I've got. So you're kind of self-diagnosing based on the adverts.
Oh, good morning, Squire. I do hope you slept soundly. Care for some breakfast? Oh, yes, I'd love some. What's on the menu? Let's have a look, shall we? We have the buffet breakfast for premium podcast members, and we have the exclusive set menu if you're a member of the Academy.
Oh, right, yeah. And apart from the breakfast options, why would I want to be a member of the premium podcast, you say? Or the
Academy, sir. Yes, you see, premium members get to enjoy the buffet along with transcripts, glossaries and flashcards to use how and when you want. Rather like the buffet if you've not cottoned on yet, Mr. Smith. Right. Yeah. I get it. Very nice. All right. So just like the buffet, I can come and go as much as I like and eat or learn, in this case, in whatever way I like, with the basic stuff available for me. Precisely, Mr. Smith. Very good. And then the members of the Academy get everything premium members get, but more importantly, they get to experience some fine dining with a set menu or structure of lessons with videos, audios, quizzes, assignments, speaking classes on Zoom, the speaking partner program, and entry into a lottery to win one-to-one classes with Charlie, the host of the podcast this bed and breakfast is associated with. Gosh, it's a fair amount of stuff, isn't it? You don't suppose I could sample a bit of both options before I decide what to do? It's funny you should say that, because we indeed have a sample sausage from the buffet, along with a sample of the premium podcast over at thebritishenglishpodcast.com/premium. And of course, we have some caviar and a full lesson to sample for the Academy over on thebritishenglishpodcast.com/academy. Again, all the links will be in the show notes and on that menu in front of you, sir. I will leave it with you to think over, and I do hope you enjoy yourself. Right, yeah, thanks. Food for thought, I suppose.
Absolutely. Or you have already been diagnosed with something. Let's say, like, growing up, I had pretty bad asthma. I was on a certain type of inhaler. I might see this commercial for a new asthma inhaler or a tablet steroid for asthma. And my mom might see it, I might see it and say, oh, well, maybe we should try that. My asthma hasn't been great. And then you would then go to the doctor and say, well, we saw this. Is this a new thing? And, so it makes it an interesting dynamic at the doctors, I would say.
Yeah, massively. And do the doctors cave to the suggestions a lot?
It's a good question. I would say maybe not cave to it, but I definitely think that they're kind of forced to have that conversation then and say, well, actually, this is why I'm recommending this type of medication. And, there might be all kinds of things. There might be different medical reps who sell one inhaler that come into their office and push that inhaler. And that's why they're recommending it. There's lots of different reasons why these things happen, why they use one brand of medication over another, prescribe one brand over another. So yeah, it kind of forces them to have that conversation and say, well, actually, this is why I've got you on this one.
And do you know many friends who are medical reps?
No, I don't really know that many. I had a friend who dated a medical rep once, and we got all kinds of information out of him once, but that's, like third party type person.
So I had one friend who did it for a bit, and he in England, so he was British, and he went to UK doctors, and they were the GPs, so general practitioners. They would just go to these doctors, and he said that the best that they can do in terms of like enticing them is buy them a lunch, like a takeaway lunch. Other than that, it's illegal to bribe them with stuff. And he would very often go and get them the best Indian from the local curry house. So his car would always smell of those strong smells. I can imagine, though, it might have come from America, the idea that you can sell the drug by bribing the doctor with a really nice golf day or a holiday or something. Maybe this was in a few decades ago. I don't know. I imagine it's probably better than that now. But any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it probably is still the same way. Maybe it has to be done in a little bit more above board kind of way, especially since the opioid crisis. I think that was something that the U.S. kind of started to examine, how prescriptions were given and why doctors were prescribing these things. And maybe that these things weren't being regulated to the degree that people thought they were. But yeah, I think conventions are a big one. Doctors get invited to conventions in different places and get paid holiday basically to come to these conventions to learn all about these certain types of medication. But the pharmaceutical companies have a lot of money, and they put a lot of money into getting doctors on their side.
So the pharmaceutical companies are the ones researching the drugs and getting the drugs through the research, proving that they're right. And I don't know if you know much about this, but I've heard that they're allowed to, is it the FDA? Is that
yes,
Food and Drug?
The Food and Drug Association.
I think that's a lot less critical than the European version. And you're allowed to do as many tests as you like, or as much research as you like, and you don't have to report the ones that weren't significant or that had bad, problems coming from it.
Mm-hmm. And not only are the pharmaceutical companies the one doing their own research, they're the ones producing, selling it, and then they are also, hiring whoever to come in and look at it and do the research. But like you say, they don't have to publish the results they don't want to.
Yeah. And so after all of that, then they're inviting the doctors, the American doctors, to the exhibitions, maybe also global, not just American doctors, but they're inviting them to these exhibitions and they're saying, look at this new drug.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then I assume they're also pushing the advertising on the TV to the consumer as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly where it comes from.
And so it's coming at both ends. The doctor's being told, sell this drug, and then the doctor's being told by the patient, but can I buy this drug? Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is all based on a business kind of profit kind of thing. Whereas, listeners, the UK has the NHS. It's starting to become privatized, unfortunately, in my opinion, and lots of things are turning that way. But still, I think a lot of people are very proud of the NHS, meaning the National Health Service, and it's free for the most part. And so there's a lot less focus on profits and etc. But it does mean that it's not a perfect experience. And I remember when we went to America, Stacey, my partner, she would often get very, very good quality service. Like in the hospitals, it was almost like we were going to a hotel. In a hospital in England. I don't know if you've been to like a walk-in center. They're not the best in comparison. Do you feel like
that? I've only really been to my GP. I haven't really been. Yeah. I've been fortunate to not have to need anything other than that.
Yes, that's good. Yeah. And the GP, is that the same in America, to have a GP?
Yes. Yeah. You do have a GP. I think they tend to be, it's a little different, or at least in my experience of having a GP here. I go to the same surgery, right? Like that, it's the same doctor's office, but I see many different doctors. I might see this doctor on a Tuesday, or if I need to go on another day, I might see a different actual doctor, even though they all work in the same practice. Whereas it's kind of like that, I suppose, in the US. But in my experience growing up, I had one or two doctors that were like my main ones. I would, like, if I were to call, I would book an appointment with a specific doctor.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember of Stacey. I thankfully didn't do much of this, but being a female, mid-20s, she would go in and she would see very specific doctors. She would come back, she said, I saw my insert long medical word. And I would be like, who's that? And so, I think in England, it's generally, you just go to the GP.
Yeah.
Earlier, you said the opioid crisis. Could you expand on that and start off like saying when it was, maybe?
Yeah. So I think, the opioid crisis has really run, I think, I'm not, like I said, I'm certainly not an expert on this, but through the 90s and early 2000s, even into now. So I really think things were quite bad, maybe like mid 2000s. But basically what happened was there was a company, the Sackler family is the pharmaceutical company. I don't know if that's was the name of the company. That was the family that ran this pharmaceutical company. And they produced this painkiller, essentially. It was a painkiller. And it was an opiate. And it was quite strong. And it started getting prescribed, especially in places where maybe the population did a lot of manual labor. So mining towns. So it tended to be places that were more rural, and people really relied on a physical way of working to support their livelihood. So really, they really relied on this. And then basically, this pharmaceutical company was really pushing this medication to these doctors, small town doctors, rural doctors, to help their patients with pain management. Is the big thing. So they could go about their lives, continue working, doing the work they needed to do to support their families, this, that, and the other thing. They knew pretty early on how addictive these things were, and they basically just buried it. And exactly what you said, didn't release the studies that had said how addictive they were. And patients were finding relief from this, beginning dosage for a while. And then that relief would go away because their bodies would adjust to it. They would get used to it. And then they would need more. And then they would need more. And while the company knew how addictive it was, they continued to create tablets that were higher and higher dosages so that these doctors could continue giving these patients this medication, and then became incredibly addictive. they became really addicted. Whole towns would become addicted to this medication for pain management because people were in real pain and it's debilitating. And then they would essentially turn into addicts, right? And doctors would be like, whoa, they would see the signs of addiction and say, I'm not giving you any more of this. And then they were truly addicted to this medication. And in order to deal with their addiction that they had been, prescribed essentially, they would have to turn to other things. Heroin was a big one. In towns where, this is true across the United States, in towns that were really ravaged by this opiate crisis, heroin is a major problem because people had to self-medicate essentially. And all of this has now been proven. There's a good show called Dope Sick for anyone who's interested in this. It's Michael Keaton. Kind of explains what happened. But basically, the company was paying off the FDA, the Food and Drug Association. They had someone on the board who was kind of looking the other way, and they were able to get around putting the addictive warning on the label, essentially.
So today, that problem still exists?
Yeah. Now, opiates are certainly not prescribed in the masses the way they used to be. People are very aware of it now. So I think they're probably coming down on the end of it, right? Because it's been exposed and now everyone knows how dangerous they are and people who are having this problem can get help. But I think it went on for years, kind of just unchecked with these addictions running rampant, essentially.
Yeah, this is something that I think non-Americans hear about in the media. Obviously, we don't really experience it firsthand by any means. But I was trying to think, what do the UK have? Because it's not exactly perfect. But I don't think we've got something as debilitating as that's been such a big controversy. I don't feel like we have. I had a little look and found that this article said 7 drugs for 7 decades. So in the 50s, apparently alcohol was a huge issue in the UK. The 60s was LSD. The 70s was cannabis. The 80s was heroin. The 90s was ecstasy. 2000s was cocaine. And then 2010s was legal highs. So
interesting.
Highs that were kind of distracting the sort of the government, essentially, allowing you to sell it through a shop that is legal. I mentioned cannabis in the 70s. I think we can all kind of stereotype that drug with the 70s quite heavily, quite easily. And I thought we could do a little game with this drug, make it a bit more lighthearted, and see how many names of this drug we can come up with. And I wanted to say something about it. And this game I thought up is called Categories. It's very common. And I should also say that this is a rule within a very famous drinking game in English-speaking countries or cultures called Ring of Fire. You've played Ring of Fire, I assume, Caity.
We call it Kings.
Oh, okay. Kings.
But it is the same thing.
I really thought Ring of Fire
Kings or King's Cup. That's what we call it.
And are you using a stereotypically red big plastic cup?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so that's a bit of a difference. Maybe nowadays our supermarkets have it, but we didn't really have that good essentially, that essential big cup that you could throw away. So we'd often find like a vase or like a random big, like the kettle. Sometimes we'd use a kettle in the middle.
Oh, outrageous.
Yeah, and you'd get a bit of like is it calcium? The build-up?
Yeah, the mineral build-up on the inside.
So the red cup is advantageous, I'd say. So yeah, this game is called Ring of Fire in the UK. Think of a table with a pack of cards spread around in a wide circle. And then card number 10 is often called categories. So people sit around these cards and then they pick up one at a time. And then each card represents a game within itself. So it's mini games within a big game. And this one is called categories. Player who picks up the card has to name a category such as dogs or cars or beers, and then you go around the circle of people and each person has to name a thing of that category. So if it were dogs, that was the chosen category, then you would each need to say a different breed of dog until one of you can't recall one, and then that person drinks. and it drinks the alcohol. Let's do it with dogs. Let's practice. I'm going to steal yours. I've picked up the card. You have a Cocker Spaniel. Do you?
What?
Cocker Spaniel?
He's half Cocker Spaniel.
Oh, Cavoodle.
Cockapoo.
Cockapoo. Okay, so we've both said one there. So back to me. Labrador.
Golden Retriever.
Bulldog.
Australian Shepherd.
Shih Tzu.
Irish Wolfhound.
God, there's actually a lot there we could go through, couldn't we? I think I could think of some more, but I'm going to leave it there. Can I think of another one? Yeah. Boxer. Anyway, end of dog warm-up game. Let's do the weed one. Caity, you've picked up the card. It's your turn now. Categories for weed.
I mean, weed in of itself is one, but we'll say pot.
Okay. Pot. Okay. Grass.
Reefer.
So are we allowed to say like the name of the utensil almost as well? Like a bifter?
I guess so. I mean, it's your game. Feel what we can.
But like you would say, I'm going to go smoke a bifter. You wouldn't say, I'm going to go smoke the weed that's in this thing.
True. But it's not a nickname for weed, though.
No, it's not. No.
It's a nickname for the thing.
Yeah. Okay. Cannabis.
Mary Jane.
Good. Mary Jane. I think there's an interesting etymology of that one. I can't remember it though. You can't remember?
Well, it comes from marijuana, I think.
Hey, marijuana. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's back to me then. Hash?
Hash? Yes.
Yeah.
So I Googled this. Hash is exactly the same, but it's really concentrated version of it. And it's like hard, and then people burn it. But
it is, like the same plant.
Yeah, same plant, yes. I'm going to cheat and look at my list. Weed, ganja, marijuana, Mary Jane, the green. Cannabis, grass, and then I wrote down a doobie, but that's kind of getting into the thing, aren't we?
Yeah, joint, doobie, blunt, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Dope is dope.
Oh, dope, yeah.
Yeah. That's the drug itself, isn't it?
That feels like a bit of an old school one. Dope.
Yeah. Bud?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Bud.
Yeah. There we go. And hash. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, the relationship with weed that Americans have and Brits have, and maybe what you have noticed the difference between the two.
Yeah. Well, it's very different. I moved to the UK from California, where it is legal. And it's legal in many states in the US, but it wasn't when I was growing up. Very different story. But yeah, in California, it's totally legal and it's very common. It's common people smoke weed or have edibles or things like that, the way people would smoke cigarettes here. In fact, I think it's way more socially acceptable in California to smoke weed than it would be to smoke a cigarette. Completely different.
That was quite an interesting thing to notice, even when we were there 8 years ago, roughly. So that was 2015-ish. Smoking felt like a bit of a dirty habit, smoking cigarettes. Whereas in Europe, it's still kind of acceptable. It's almost still cool. Still a little bit cool, I'd say. And in Germany, it's advertised openly, smoking.
Oh, is it really? Interesting.
Yeah, like the billboards. Whereas, I feel like America campaigned well with that and made it a taboo or like uncool to smoke. Yeah,
I do think the younger obviously it still happens, but yeah, it definitely depends on where you are. But for sure, it's definitely not like a cool thing to do anymore, I would say.
And to bring weed back into the conversation, in the UK, most of the time, I think people mix the two, tobacco and weed, in a utensil or a joint or whatever. But I think in America, it's different.
Yeah, it would just be the bud. It would just be the marijuana plant that you would have in a joint or a bong or a blunt or whatever you choose to smoke out of. I don't know.
And a bong?
I will remember.
Can you explain a bong?
I can try my best. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know there's water in it and you light something and then breathe into it and it pulls the smoke up.
So it's like a contraption. It's much bigger. It's like it's glass most of the time.
They're glass usually, yeah.
See-through glass, and you burn at the bottom, and then things happen with the bubbly water when you suck it, and then inhale. And that, I think, is a very, very quick, rather deadly way of consuming it.
Yeah, I definitely think it hits you very fast, immediately.
Yeah.
And when you're smoking it, just the weed, and you don't include tobacco, again, I think you probably reach a different level of high.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. California is very open to it. Is it acceptable to go to work high? We will leave it there for part 1 of today's episode. Thank you very much for listening up to this point. If you did want to listen to part 2 and part 3 of this conversation, then you can head over to thebritishenglishpodcast.com and check out the premium podcast or academy memberships. The premium podcast gives you access to the full conversation along with extended glossaries, transcripts, and flashcards, whereas the academy gives you all of that plus exclusive videos and audios for the season-based episodes, explaining the vocabulary, exampling them, giving you quizzes, writing assignments, and weekly speaking classes on Zoom. But if you were just here for part 1 of this conversation, then I thank you very much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do grab that free worksheet by clicking the link in the show notes. My name's Charlie, and I will see you next week on the British English Podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Before you go, make sure you know where you stand in your English learning journey. I've created a free English level test that you can take right now to find out your exact level. It's quick, easy, and gives you instant results. Head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or check the link in the show notes. Because tracking your progress helps you stay on track. We can't use track twice, guys. No, let's do that again. Yep, we don't have time. Oh. All right, we'll just delete this last sentence then.